It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham. Winnipeg Blue Bombers' new offensive coordinator Tommy Condell talks about his working philosophy with coaches.
I think number one, it speaks volumes in regards to who Mike hires and things of that nature. Then got a chance to have private conversations, and those will remain private with Mr. Hogan. You know, I knew Jason all the way back from Toronto when I was with Mark Trestman and stuff. Like because he came in as a guest coach, so we had a long-standing opportunity to know each other all the way back then. I think it was in 2018 or 17. I can't remember. But to be able to go in there and be able to discuss different things with Jason and to know that, to me, that we always have the team in mind. He certainly has high character, competence in the position, great communicator, and be able to connect. If you have those four things, those are going to be the things that are going to be able to be great coaches. And we want those to be able to be part of the staff. I think the big thing is this. We both have a lot to give and offer each other for growth.
And before we get too far in, Third Down Gamble, as we enter our 7th season of podcasting, and we're hoping that you stay with us as we continue on. That was Tommy Condell talking about the situation that he's going into in Winnipeg. The Blue Bombers have hired him as their offensive coordinator. That's kind of old news, but let's talk about the impact that this had on the football team. Number one, Jason Hogan. Number two, what does it mean for Brady Oliveira? And number three, what does it mean for Zach Collaros and the whole tenor of that offense?
And number four, Jarius Jackson, who we'll talk to a little bit later on, has moved to another city as well. Zach Collaros, I believe, is very happy to have Tommy Condell back as his offensive coordinator. They worked together, of course, with the Hamilton Tiger Cats back in 2013 to 2015, I believe. So we're going back over a decade now. Tommy Condell is known as a quarterback-friendly offensive coordinator. So Zach, having a bit of a down year last year, coming towards the end of the career, I'm sure is thrilled to have somebody that he's that comfortable with back at the helm. Jason Hogan goes back to running backs coach, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought, and I know we've discussed this as well, losing that offensive coordinator position and going and taking a step backwards to running backs coach has to be a tough situation for Hogan. From all accounts, he is very professional. He's respected within the Bombers organization. Brady Oliveira loved him as running backs coach. Maybe not so much as offensive coordinator. Both Zach and Brady may be a little bit disappointed with the way Jason Hogan ran schemes and set up game plans. All around, I think this is going to be a bit of an uptick for the Bombers offense next year.
Tommy Condell has had success, and then he's also had downtime. Last year in Ottawa, he had a decent offense. It was Midland in terms of passing, Midland in terms of rushing, Midland in terms of, better actually in terms of times of possession, but then rock bottom in terms of offensive output, in terms of scoring. If you can't put the ball in the end zone, it's great to run between the 20s, but you got to get it into the end zone. When he had Dane Evans as his quarterback, they put up amazing numbers. The knock against Tommy Condell is that he's more of a pass-happy offensive coordinator. But if you look at his tenure, the running aspect of the game is still integral into what he does. And in fact, Ottawa only had about 50 less carries last year than the Blue Bombers did. You extrapolate that over 18 games, that's 3 carries a game less. That's not that much.
But some would argue that the Bombers maybe had a down year rushing the ball as well. They are a team over the last 6 or 7 seasons that have been very run heavy and built their offense around Andrew Harris, around Brady Oliveira as the key components. And we've seen the results of it. Both have had massive offensive outputs. Brady's won a couple of awards as a running back as well. Andrew Harris. This will be the test for Winnipeg. Is how do they mix in one of the top running backs, if not the top running back in the league, keep him happy, but also rejuvenate a passing attack that has gone downhill. And Hamilton has been an interesting study over the last number of years. They have really gone pass heavy and turned away from the run. They got a little bit back into it this past season, but Winnipeg, and we can talk about rosters somewhere down the road here as well, but I think Winnipeg really needs to fine tune and make improvements on that offensive line, both for protection and for run plays. And we'll see if they can make the tweaks necessary to help get this offense on track.
You mentioned tweaks. Chris Kolinkowski is now out of a job in Winnipeg. Now, he had been in Toronto before, won a Grey Cup with them. He comes over to the Blue Bombers, and now he's looking for employment again. The offensive line last year for Winnipeg, it seemed to me, especially as the season wore on, they started to get beat more and more. And it could be a function of age, could be a function of tactics. They've had the same offensive line coach for the past dozen years. But as Tommy Condell comes into the situation, how does he and Jason Hogan work it out? Because even in the mind of the head coach, Mike O'Shea, they even had this conversation right after the Alouettes beat them in the Eastern semifinal. And he talked to Hogan about what the possibilities were. And his employment maybe came up, and Hogan wasn't taking it well that maybe there was a demotion in the process. Now, Hogan, according to Condell, is a very class person, and he'll find a way through this, and he's going to put the organization first, which is fantastic. But still, I don't care how great you are that way. You've got to have some hurt feelings over this.
100%. And this will be a real test for that Bombers coaching staff and Mike O'Shea, keeping them together as a cohesive unit. He has built a reputation and an atmosphere with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers about everybody buying in and playing for the good of the team and going 1-0 every week and playing for the guy beside you, all those sorts of things. This is really putting your money where your mouth is. And Jason Hogan's success on the Bombers staff in 2026 is going to show, or his lack of success, it's really going to show where they're at as a staff, as an organization. If he can keep this cohesive, get Brady Oliveira to 1,200 plus yards rushing, Zach Collaros 4,000 plus yards and in that 20 TD range, that's a resounding success for Winnipeg. If they start falling below that, you have to look at what is going on and where those problems are.
You're going to look no further than the offensive line. If that offensive line suddenly starts to slow down because they're all aging out at the same moment, and they've got a lot of people in their mid to late 30s on that offensive line, you're going to be looking at that front five and how are you going to fix that? Because without them, you're not throwing and you're not running.
And that's a great point. They do have some younger guys. I think moving Kolinkowski on is going to give an opportunity. So do we see Tua Ellie or maybe Nathan Vibert move into that center position? Patty Neufeld stays at guard. We know we've got Stanley Bryant as a tackle. Gabe Wallace is only 25 years old. He's a monster. And if he gets a little bit more confidence in that guard position as well, look out. That could be an offensive line that does some damage. I've said it before, but I'm going to reiterate it one more time. When Winnipeg was dominant in 2019, 21, even 22, they had undoubtedly the best combination of offensive and defensive lines in the league and built out from there to build success. As they've lost pieces of that defensive line, as Willie Jefferson's got a little bit older, Jake Thomas got a little bit slower, and we'll talk about him in a moment here as well, the defensive line took a hit. Jamarcus Hardrick moved on from the offensive line. Drew DeJarly moved on from that offensive line. Stanley Bryant, again, another year older. Patty Neufeld, another year older. They have to look at what was successful, what it took to build those dominant lines and get back to it. As we saw those two positions on the field start to regress, the Bombers as a team regressed in the standings.
And let's go right to Jake Thomas. He has retired. He was the longest serving Blue Bomber. He has now moved from the defensive line to become their defensive line coach. What do you think that will mean for that defensive line?
I think a lot of confidence in Jake Thomas as the coach. 13 seasons with the Bombers. He was a 2013 draft pick. We saw what he means to the organization when they finally won that Grey Cup in 2019. First guy to pick up the cup, get it handed to him, was Jake Thomas. He's well respected. Mike O'Shea obviously is a big fan, having brought him back year after year as well. We've seen Mike Miller go from special teams menace to special teams coordinator in this organization. They like the promotion from within aspect, and Jake Thomas has a lot of experience as an offensive line player with over 200 games played in the CFL. That's a lot of game day experience and a lot of knowledge. He's seen so many different schemes from offensive lines. I think this is going to be a great fit for this organization. Following suit on that, today we see the announcement Micah Johnson in Saskatchewan has retired as a player and has now moved into the role of defensive line coach. So maybe this is a bit of a trend.
Well, the Rough Riders probably took a cue from the Blue Bombers, and Micah Johnson was getting to the end of his career, but he is tight with the head coach, Corey Mace. They've had a long history going back to their days in Calgary. This is not a surprise that this will be happening in Saskatchewan. Micah Johnson is a very positive, energetic, very motivated individual. I think it's going to be a great hire for that defensive line. But again, from player to coach, that transition, because now the guys you are playing with, you are now trying to teach. And this is what that transition entails. How well do you make that move, Jake Thomas? Can you tell guys, hey, I don't want to see that anymore? As the coach, when as a player, you'd come up to him and say, hey, come on, let's get this one back.
That might be a bit of a challenge, right? Is that camaraderie that they've built as a cohesive unit on those lines over the years. And Micah Johnson, 37 years old, has over 178 regular season games. He suited up for plus playoffs as well. So that's a wealth of experience between those two players. That's 400 regular season games at defensive line combined. This will be great. I know, and you've talked about Micah Johnson as well, the style of football he played. He was basically going to play for the Riders as long as he wanted to. There was probably some conversations with Coach Mace going into this off season, and for him to have that ability to slide right into the coaching position is great as well. He's played with Corey Mace. They won a Grey Cup together back in 2014. A very young coaching staff, really, in Saskatchewan. If you kind of look at the overall ages of those coordinators, head coach, and now this defensive line coach as well, it's a real youth movement, and that probably helps them connect with the players of today.
That's an interesting observation. You think about them compared to the team we just talked about, the Blue Bombers. It's almost a generation apart in terms of age. And maybe that is the case, that the newer player wants to respond to somebody that's been through it the way they've had to go through it. Where Mike O'Shea played, I wouldn't say in a bygone era by any stretch. He finished his career long before anybody that he sees on the field as a player now.
That's very true. But he also, as we talked about, has a bit of a younger staff with Jason Hogan, Tommy Condell being the outlier here now, but Jason Hogan in that staff, and even Buck Pierce coming through into that coordinator position, kind of in between. But Mike Miller, right from everyday player into the coaching staff. And now we're seeing the same with Jake Thomas. Maybe some of these old guys are losing a bit of the modern philosophy, or maybe not as adaptable to the modern philosophy. And that's why we're seeing some of these younger guys coming into play.
It could be the case, but you look at the defensive coordinator in Calgary, who's right now at 70. It's about adaptability for sure, but it's also understanding the game and where it is at this moment in time. And if you listen to the podcast with Steve Daniel, you heard that the Stampeders were the most adept at keeping the opposition starting on their own half of the field. So maybe age isn't the issue. It's just how do you communicate and how do you get the message across? And that's where your key as a coach is what can you provide for the players to get them to play the way they need to. Jarius Jackson has now signed on with the Stampeders as their quarterbacks coach, given that Tommy Condell is coming to Winnipeg.
Happy to see Jarius Jackson continue to get opportunities in the CFL. I think he's a quality guy, brings something to the coaching staffs as well. I'm a bit sad to see him leave Winnipeg, in all honesty, but understanding Tommy Condell and his relationship with quarterbacks, you can kind of see how this transpired. Glad to see he got that opportunity. I was hopeful that he would have been in the running seriously for the Edmonton Elks head coach position before they hired Coach Killam for the 2025 season. Fortunately, the Bombers gave him that opportunity to stay in the game, and now likewise the Calgary Stampeders. Vernon Adams Jr. is a quality quarterback. He had a great comeback season in 2025. So let's see what Jarius Jackson can do with that quarterback room and help Vernon Adams continue on the successful road.
In his development, Jarius Jackson has proven to be a very good quarterbacks coach. When he was with Saskatchewan before, with Edmonton prior to becoming the head coach, he could get his quarterbacks to play within the expectations that they had. Moving to Calgary, I don't know how he's going to work with Dave Dickenson. Of course, Dave Dickenson, a very strong-willed individual, but he's having to devote more time to being a general manager. And as a result, maybe teaching the quarterbacks a little bit differently would be a good thing. And Jarius Jackson will certainly have a different philosophy. You just want them to mesh. And as we mentioned before, Bob Slowick is still their defensive coordinator. If they can sign all their potential FAs, this Calgary football team may be scary in 2026.
Lengthy conversation this past weekend with some CFL fans, and the talk was about how surprising Calgary was in 2025 and how tough the West Division overall could be this year. So I don't see Saskatchewan regressing very much. Now, this is all contingent on free agency and who signs where. Saskatchewan should be a top contender again. We saw Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions really a play or two away from going to the Grey Cup. Calgary had a couple of off years and made leaps and bounds improvement in 2025, making the playoffs and scaring some teams as well. Winnipeg, although taking a step back, still finished at 10-8. The Edmonton Elks are the other team in the West right now. They've locked up Cody Fajardo for another season. They've got some continuity. They've got a new coach that had some success in 25 and is going to want to continue to build. I don't see anybody running away in the West this year, and it could come down to that last week with a couple of playoff spots still up for grabs.
The Bombers were 11-7 in 2024. It's not like they stepped back that far. It felt like it because they had to go out east, but that's because of the strength of the West this year. Now, I don't think that's going to be a twice in a row thing. The East is going to get better, and especially with Brian Dinwiddie out of Toronto and a new head coach in Toronto, I think the East is going to be a lot better overall. Where I see the change in the West is Edmonton. They've kind of figured out what they want to do with quarterback. If they can shore up their defense a little bit better, it could be a 9-win team. And then what?
We'll get into our prognostications a little bit further down the road when we see some more free agency. I'm maybe not as confident as you with the East. I think Hamilton and Montreal absolutely are going to be right there with any team in the West. My questions are Toronto and Ottawa and how they bounce back. Now, crazy things happen. We talk about the Montreal Alouettes a couple of seasons ago when nobody expected them to do anything. All they did was go through and run rampant over everybody in the second half of the season and win a Grey Cup. If Ottawa or if Toronto gets things rolling in the right direction, who knows what can happen.
Let's see what Mike Miller can do, and especially if Chad Kelly is healthy and ready to go. You don't think that the Argos are going to put up 30-plus a game?
They certainly could. Everybody finishes at 9-9, and there's some coin flips and points for and against coming into play to see who makes the playoffs.
That would be awesome.
Steve Daniel, Associate Vice President with the CFL, in charge of football analytics, and I'm happy to be here on Third Down Gamble.
Stavros Katsantonis signs a big deal to stay with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He hits $200,000 large to sign a 3-year deal with the team. A great move by the Ticats to get that security.
That's a lot of money for a safety, but he is an impact player on the field. So you love to see those Canadian players rewarded for on-field abilities. Stavros is certainly one of those, a hard-hitting safety and a smart player as well. Great for that Hamilton defense that's maybe been the question mark as opposed to the offense. I don't think anybody questioned Bo Levi Mitchell and that offense over the last couple of seasons. It was, how is the defense going to do? Katsantonis is a player that has stepped up and shown he can lead this defense, and it's a great move for the Ticats to have him be a part moving forward.
This is always that age-old question of, do you want to re-sign, say, with the team and take what you can get and then move forward and not worry about free agency? Or do you want to see if there's how much money is left out there to be signed as an FA somewhere else? Well, some of these guys are saying, I'm not worrying about it. Dedrick Mills in Calgary signed a huge contract with that team, making him the highest paid American running back in the Football League. He's going to make nearly $200,000 with all his bonuses tied into this. Teams are trying to shore up. And if you're a player and you think your team has somewhere to go, as we talked about in the previous podcast, there's money in playoff money. There's money in Grey Cup money. You could make up all of that if you're with a team that can win.
100%. And we've talked about it. Players have admitted that they've turned down larger offers because they believed they were going to get that bonus money come playoff time. Hamilton's close. If Bo Levi Mitchell remains healthy and productive, that Grey Cup drought is coming to an end in the foreseeable future. Locking a player, as I said, of his caliber up, 3-year contract extension. So that's significant. We're starting to see more of those 3-year deals in the CFL, which I think is fantastic. No more ones or one with an option, those sorts of things. When you see the talent, you reward them. You're locking them up for that extra season. And that goes a long way to build that continuity as well as the fan base. We know fans love to connect with a team. If 45% of your roster turns over every year, where are those connections?
And the Alouettes extend Alexander Hollins, who they picked up partway through the season last year from the BC Lions. But they released Deontay Ruffin, their defensive back, who's apparently maybe money talks, and the Alouettes weren't going to spend it.
Hollins needs a big bounce back year this year. He had productive numbers with the BC Lions, released by Edmonton, and then only really suited up for 5 games with the Alouettes last year. 8 receptions for 163 yards, most of those in a single game as well. So he had 132 yards in the game in week 12. Definitely an off year for Hollins. I expect him to bounce back. He seems to be a quality receiver and has shown that with his production with the BC Lions. Let's hope, getting a full season with Davis Alexander throwing him the ball, that those numbers start to go back up.
Well, the Alouettes have already moved away from Darnell Sankey. He's now signed with the BC Lions. Marc-Antoine Dequoy, are they going to re-sign him? The Alouettes are making some moves, and it isn't necessarily because they want to get younger. It's because they have to make some room to pay their starting quarterback.
The defense has been the talk of the Montreal Alouettes and their strength for the last couple of seasons. So to see Sankey gone so early and to see those talks about whether or not Dequoy gets re-signed and now Ruffin, it's surprising to see those moves because they have built so much success with a strong defense. And those are some big pieces of that puzzle. Maybe they've got some other ideas already of what's coming in. Surprising this early. We're a month away from that free agent negotiation window. Obviously, when you release players this early, it shows that you didn't have the intention or the budget to re-sign them. So you're giving them that opportunity to get ahead of the game, get some contract offers early and make some decisions, similar to what we talked about with Chris Kolankowski and the Blue Bombers setting him free this early as well. Obviously, with Ruffin, with Kolankowski, with Sankey, lots of football left in those guys, but they just didn't seem to fit with the team that had them last year.
BC Lions on the other coast have decided that maybe re-upping is a better way to go. So defensive lineman Sione Tahama and defensive tackle Jonah Tavai, who signed through 2027, have stayed with the team. It's kind of a quiet BC Lions defensive line. You only get the press coverage because of Matthew Betts. The others don't seem to garner much, but yet as that season wore on in 2025, they got better and better. And these were the two cogs that were kind of under the radar doing the dirty work.
Kind of the flip side of the coin to the Montreal Alouettes. The Lions' success over the past couple of seasons has been high-octane offenses. Like you said, with that defense a little bit under the radar, this is a great extension for the BC Lions to get both of these defensive players back, signed to extensions, ready to go. Matthew Betts, a little bit of a slow start coming back to the CFL, but he's hit full stride and had some outstanding games in 2025. So continuing to build on that and get these guys beside him bodes well for BC and their improved defense. A couple of guys maybe in the defensive back positions that are aging out with the Lions. We'll see what comes in as far as youth and new opportunities in that defensive secondary.
And I draw back to that Christmas Eve 2025 podcast with Steve Daniel and the Lions, 8.5 yards per play on offense. That's ridiculous. That's just stratospheric beyond belief. Nathan Rourke is healthy and he's got receivers that are moving. That defense in BC only has to keep them in the game because the offense will get them through the game.
This is going back to some late 80s, early 90s kind of put up 45 points a game and hope your defense keeps the other team to around 40 and you get the win.
Well, it makes you wonder, too, in 2027 when the field is 10 yards shorter, what are the Lions going to be doing then?
That's a team that's going to be going for it on those third down gambles, not trying to kick field goals. They'll have a lot of confidence going for it on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, and try to keep that offense on the field.
Third down.
New details have come out in the contract extension for Bo Levi Mitchell with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, looking at about $485,000 in hard money for 2026. Let's break down what all of this means.
It's a new era in CFL, and there's different allowances that go into contracts. For instance, you've got the signing bonus, counts as part of the contract, and then you've got marketing money, you've got housing allowances, and you've got travel allowances. It used to be you just get a contract, you'd be paid this much, you figure out the rest. Now they actually parse it out and put it into its pieces. So he's going to have a $210,000 base salary, $40,000 in marketing money. That's going out and promoting the team whenever asked. $15,300 for housing. That would be an accommodation for him moving from Calgary to play. And then another $10,000 travel allowance. That would be obviously going back and forth with family. $485,000 in hard. That isn't a high-end contract, though. Zach Collaros, Trevor Harris, I believe, makes just a little bit more. Definitely Nathan Rourke, Davis Alexander make more.
This puts him as the 5th highest paid quarterback in the CFL, which is a little bit surprising to see a back-to-back outstanding player candidate be as low as 5th. Currently behind Nathan Rourke, Chad Kelly, Zach Collaros, and Vernon Adams Jr. He does have a bigger contract than Drew Brown, Trevor Harris, and Cody Fajardo. They're all pretty comparable, too. You start looking at these contracts where they top out. He's within a few $1,000s. Now, I mean, we're still talking about a lot of money to the average person, but he could get as high as over $515,000. There's some incentives in this contract as well. If he plays in 16 games this season, that can boost his numbers a little bit higher as well.
Rourke is making almost $750. So it's not a few dollars that he's behind. He's a lot less than that. Fair enough, though, compared to the others. Chad Kelly is up there, and definitely Zach Collaros as well. They are making high-end money. Vernon Adams Jr., I think you're right. He's much closer, Drew Brown, much closer to what the money is for Bo Levi Mitchell in this new contract. Meanwhile, Trevor Harris, who's at the end of his career, decided to take a little bit less so they could pay somebody else to be on the team. He wants to go back to back. Why not? He's made his money in his tenure with the CFL. And Cody Fajardo, who really kind of took one for the team as well and basically said, make some room for somebody else to come back, which then raises the question, and we'll get to it later, what happens to Trey Ford? But in the Ticats universe, does this help them deal with Taylor Powell?
That's a tough question, and we know pretty much every starting quarterback position is locked up for 2026. The movement is going to come from who backs up whom. We're going to see some movement. Taylor Powell had some starts and some success with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Some injuries knocked him out, and Bo Levi Mitchell got that chance again and has run with it. He's been outstanding for the Ticats. Taylor Powell, I'm sure, wants an opportunity to compete. And if he doesn't feel like he's getting the fair shake with Hamilton, he could look elsewhere. And Montreal, having promoted Davis Alexander with McLeod Bethel Thompson as the number 2 guy, that could be an opportunity. I don't know how much more Thompson is committed to the CFL, if he even wants to play in 2026. There's going to be maybe some opportunity there. Ottawa, we've talked about Drew Brown's injury struggles. They've had Dustin Crum that they have some confidence in. Are they going to want to bring him back, or does Powell move into a situation there where he's got an opportunity? Winnipeg, Zach Collaros is still the number 1 guy. Chris Streveler is unlikely to recover from his knee injuries and get an opportunity. Where does that leave them? Terry Wilson's under contract. They've brought in a couple other guys that they've signed right now. They might be looking for an experienced backup.
Winnipeg, of course, you've got Taylor Algersma, who's now doing his NFL tour in Miami. As he tries to land somewhere in the NFL, the Bombers have to wait it out to see what happens with him. Curtis Rourke, another one that's still playing his trade, trying to land a contract with the NFL to stay on a team throughout the season. Those are the two big quarterbacks that were drafted last year. Again, both teams knew going in, they'll have to take a wait and see. Now, we talk about Powell and maybe signing with the Ticats, maybe not. I mentioned before that I think the Rough Riders would be interested in Taylor Powell. Jake Maier is not signed yet. He is still listed as an FA on the Rough Riders roster. He may be on the way out. They've already signed Tommy Stevens, and they've already obviously signed Trevor Harris. Somebody has to be that number 3 quarterback. And does Taylor Powell look at the situation in Saskatchewan and say, well, hey, how long is he going to be there? And I wouldn't mind that competition.
That would be a good fit, I think, as well, because Tommy Stevens has been labeled as one of those short yardage specialists, but hasn't really had an opportunity to lead an offense. Where you look at somebody like Taylor Powell, who he's been on the field as a starting quarterback in the league, similar to Saskatchewan bringing Jake Maier in last year in that backup role. Taylor Powell would be a similar fit as somebody that you can rely on to start a couple of games if necessary. Trevor Harris, as we said, he's going to be 40 years old by the time camp rolls around. Maybe that load management phrase comes into play a little bit as well, where if you want to rest him up, you'll want somebody capable of stepping in.
Well, you'll be scrapping with Trevor Harris if you try it, because I've been at Mosaic Stadiums enough time to see he gets pulled off the field in favor of load management. He is not one happy camper. He is out there. He's a gamer. He wants to play, as does any football player. I guess if you're the Hamilton Tiger Cats and you're not sold on anybody but Bo Levi Mitchell to be your starting quarterback, do you go out into the market and try to find somebody else?
We've tossed around a lot of names that are possibilities, and not the least of which, I think the big elephant in the quarterback free agent room is Trey Ford with the Edmonton Elks. Now, not a free agent yet. However, he's due for a $100,000 roster bonus on February 1st. I feel it's unlikely he receives that bonus. I think he's going to be cut loose before that. And again, now you've got teams looking at, do they see a future in developing Trey Ford, bringing him into that backup role, maybe learning an extra year or so behind somebody like Trevor Harris, like Bo Levi Mitchell, like Zach Collaros, and see where the future takes you.
It's a risk you're going to have to take. If you're going to bring in Trey Ford, you're going to have to spend some time with them. Trey Ford, to me, is such a random prospect. He can either be brilliant and you're getting your highlight reel on TSN filled with what he's done, or he can be mediocre and people are questioning why he's out there in the first place. Trey Ford needs confidence. He needs to believe that he can do this again. The experience in Edmonton, especially this past year, has really hurt him. And I think he needs a fresh start. Maybe going back home, maybe finding the Southern Ontario market would be the best thing for him. That would most likely be Hamilton, but Toronto may be interested as well.
Toronto's another interesting part of the equation, right? You've got Chad Kelly anointed as the number 1 guy. Nick Arbuckle won a Grey Cup MVP, leading them to victory in Chad Kelly's absence. But where do they go? And you want somebody to create some excitement. Trey Ford does that every time he's on the field, good and bad, as you said, but he's made some amazing scrambles. He puts himself at risk, which I think a coach may have to help mitigate a little bit as well. But from a marketing standpoint, having somebody like him on your team, especially in that Southern Ontario market, like you said, Toronto or Hamilton, can do wonders. And I agree, a fresh start for him is sorely needed. I think he's run his course in Edmonton through a couple of coaches now, new general managers, new ownership, everything. He didn't get to where he hoped to be, and now it's time to move on.
He parallels to me Anthony Calvillo in so many different ways. When Calvillo came into the league with the Las Vegas Posse, He scrambled, he fired, he was throwing it from everywhere. And then as the posse disappeared and the team got disbanded, the players got moved around, he wound up in Hamilton, and him and Don Sutherland did not get along. And at that moment in his career, he was ready to call it quits. Now he got a chance to get out, get moved over to Montreal, settled in, and started to, instead of worrying about what wasn't happening, started to focus on what he could learn in the situation. That's his own words. In other words, don't pout, figure it out. And that takes a huge person to be able to do that. Tre Ford is in that same sort of situation where he started with a splash, didn't go so well. Coaching staff isn't happy with him. He's got to get somewhere where he can just take a breath and find a way to get back to where he was.
There are limited opportunities with only 9 teams in the CFL. You have to make hay when the sun is shining. And we saw some flashes of brilliance from Tre Ford in Edmonton. If you look at wins and losses prior to 2025, you go through Taylor Cornelius and run down the list of quarterbacks who had a chance in Edmonton. Tre Ford was the one that had a 500 record as a starting quarterback with the Edmonton Elks. Nobody else came close to it. So he's had success. He knows how to win games, maybe not in the regular fashion that people are used to seeing, but he was a gamer, and he got off to a slow start in 2025. The Elks brought in Cody Fajardo for that experience and that leadership. He stepped in when Ford struggled and really helped push the Elks forward. And they're confident in Fajardo and happy with him at the helm, have signed him through the 2026 season as their number one guy. And unfortunately, that leaves Tre Ford out.
You think of Cody Fajardo. Here's another guy that was a third down specialist, just like Tommy Stevens, and had to earn his way to become a quarterback that could throw the football. Tre Ford, he's got a future in this league. It's just a question of where and when, and it may be a year or two away before he gets another starting opportunity. But even with that, sometimes get paid to just chill. It's not a bad thing.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.